Hi,
Hello.
Lisa.
Hi, how are you, Marcella? Nice to see you.
Very good. Good to see you. So I'm here at Castello di Liguri in a closed museum in the days in which all museums in Italy are closed and many museums in the world. And I'm very glad we can have this conversation, as a visitor in a closed museum, being able to be here and speak with an artist, although in a distance, and talk about a work. It's absolutely healing. So, first of all, thank you for joining me today in this on distance calling. The occasion of this short Instagram that we would like to share with others is to briefly talk about a wonderful piece, a work with no title, as most of your works, since quite a long time, that it's here behind me. Jason, of course, knows the piece very well. Um, and for those of you, people eventually watching us, the piece is six knives. Actually, it's the six steps that bring to the making of a knife. Uh, and Jason, when you first proposed to us this piece, you wrote very few things actually about it, but one of the things that I guess really I thought were particularly strong, of course, in the peculiar context in which we live today, is that you wrote that the piece talks about the progression of the making of a knife, um, and it's about, because it's a progression, it's a piece that somehow has a very strong relation with the concept of transition. Transition, of course, referring to moments such as this one in which we live, in which the museum is closed, is in between moments in which we hopefully can welcome visitors again. Um, in a way, I guess you also mentioned that there are moments in the life of a museum that recur when, for example, we are in between exhibitions. I guess hinting also to the fact that there is a cycle in museum life, and we might be ready in a way as an institution to think and talk about transition. So this was definitely one of the key concepts, I guess, that were particularly strong when I first read the proposal and when we received the first information about this piece.
Hmm. Well, it was always curious to me. Well, one of the things that I love about being an artist is that when somebody offers an exhibition, that they're offering you a space and a time, and there's something really beautiful about that notion of just saying, maybe you could do something in this place on these days. But then there's a life that an institution has outside of that situation, and there are transitions from one exhibition to another. And I thought about how it's strange that that time and that space isn't activated also. And when institutions started to be locked down, and I remember reading about the Donald Judd show at the Museum of Modern Art, which had been installed but couldn't open for many months. And it really struck me, that idea of like these big empty rooms in this new spaces of this museum with big empty boxes with dust falling on them. And that seemed so alive and so beautiful to me, in a way, something more alive and beautiful than that same exhibition as it was meant to happen, with other bodies walking around looking at the boxes. And it just seems very like the closed museum is also a context that could be really interesting to work with, interesting to think about, to talk about, and to try to give a kind of to let that space and that time in these sort of institutions of culture also be activated in our imagination. And so I like that idea of making a work that's not necessarily seen by the public, but exists within these rooms. And in the case of Castello di Rivoli, rooms that are filled with the things that are in this world, that if they weren't in this world, I probably wouldn't have been able to think the way that I think, because a lot of the collection of Castello is the foundation of my own artistic thinking and my own education in a way.
Yeah, and I guess that, while installing the piece here, and Franco Nero was here in these galleries here as well when we first installed the work. It's very interesting because I guess we are currently used to think about our works of art in terms of exhibitions, meaning that the life of the artwork, even in the recent way we look at the history of the works, we often tend to mainly give attention to the moments in which works of art was actually exhibited to the public eye. As if there would be a very strong connection between the two things. Well, indeed, I guess that with your work conceived for a closed museum, we actually go back to a very ancient concept of the work of art really as something that has a peculiar life, that has a life of its own, and really it is almost as if we are going back in time with this work. To the moment in which the work was made in order even not to be shown, which is very much the opposite of the way the current digital culture somehow is spoiling us. We want to do something and immediately it has to be exhibited, it has to be shown, it becomes, it resonates through a huge number of digital reproductions. And on the opposite, in a way, the essence of the work of art has nothing to do with that. It's about actually having its own presence and its own value despite everything else that is behind it. So this piece, I guess, has this, you talked about it as a talisman, making the galleries, the museum, these rooms sharp, to keep them sharp, but it's also about reactivating, I guess, the value of the work of art per se as something that it's able to hold its presence and have its own power despite the fact that we actually are not seeing it. So it exposes, I guess, your piece, the way our current culture has changed in a way and has somehow dictated a dictatorship of vision and of presence and of visibility that was not absolutely part of the original concept of a work of art. So that was, to me, I guess, the amazing discovery that, having the privilege to actually hold the piece for a moment in my hand was really somehow opened my eyes to this concept that is behind the work.
That's nice. Marcella, were you in Boston at the time of the big theft at the Gardner Museum?
No, not at the time.
Not at that time. I was just thinking, hearing you speaking about how um, that was such a defining moment, you know, all of these, like it was such a big grab of so many artworks, and really substantial works that are now out of sight, but we can be pretty certain that they still exist. Um, and that idea of, you know, why can't we still make exhibitions with those works in it? You know, like the what is the visibility outside of the imagination? Like, what's the exchange between those things? I mean, maybe in a sense, that's one of also why I'm interested in language, but in language in other people's work, because words themselves are not a thing that you can put in a place and claim in one place. They're just a thing that um, does other things, and it doesn't belong to anybody and you can't grasp it. Why shouldn't an artwork also be able to play with some of those ideas of not being sort of um, doing the things that we expect it to do?
But do you think, Jason? I mean, what about artworks that are not behaving the way they should, or artworks that uh, talk about things that we maybe don't want to see? I mean, certain works of yours often resonate with the presence of people who's not around anymore, or people who has been using them, and then somehow the traces are not even necessarily visible. I mean, in your work, the enigma of visibility, I think, it's often at work in a way.
Hmm. Well, it's funny because I think that as soon as it becomes an artwork, it's enigmatic, but any of the things that I'm dealing with in my work are part of our lives in every way. Like you can't see somebody's heart, but you know it's beating. You know, you can't see, we know that we're all walking around with joy and with grief and with all kinds of things, but you can't see those things. We also even know that there's electricity running through the walls of our houses, but we can't see it. And so I feel like sculpture is so unique in that the thingness of it allows us to speak about that. And it's clumsy to talk about the idea of absence or presence, or the presence of absence and all these things, but it's the best we've got when we're using language to describe how a thing has this complexity of knowing something is there versus imagining something is there versus wishing something was there. Um, Going into a museum where there's an artwork that you just love so much that you're going to carry around with you in your mind and your body for days after seeing it, but you can't touch it and you can't go there after the hours of the museum being closed. It's so sort of stuck in something. Why can't, like, I think it's interesting with sculpture to be able to try to explore some of those physical notions that we're experiencing already. There's a beautiful book uh, that I've read to my children called The Mixed Up Files of Dr. Basil Frankweiler. It's about a boy and a girl who run away from home, and they stow away at the Metropolitan Museum, and they figure out how to hide in the bathrooms on top of the toilets at night so that the guards don't detect them. And then the guards leave, and then they kind of take over the museum at night, and they bathe in the fountains and take coins from the floors of the fountains to buy themselves food from the vending machine. And it's a book for young readers, but it's about the underlying theme not only is about running away from home and living in the museum, but authenticating a potential Michelangelo sculpture. And this very precocious girl feels like she's solved the riddle by seeing a piece of velvet that was underneath this supposedly Michelangelo sculpture that had the velvet of the fabric had been slightly embossed by the signature underneath the sculpture. And she wondered if nobody had actually looked underneath the sculpture to see that it had been signed by Michelangelo. Um, but all of that that book itself, I mean, it's so great with reading it to each of the kids as they come into the age where it makes sense. So it's like a few years gap between each time I'm reading it. Um, and it never stops being resonant. I loved it as a child and I love it now, because it uses the museum, the closed museum. I mean, I'm just connecting that to this now, but it certainly wasn't the origin of the idea of this piece, but I can see that the closed museum is something that's not new to my mind.
So what do you think, Jason, the knives will do tonight once I and few of the colleagues that are here today will leave the museum?
I guess they'll be doing the same thing they're doing right now. We don't know what they're doing even if we watch them.
Well, maybe we should just explain actually in detail before ending this wonderful short conversation what are exactly these knives and how you came across the artisan that makes them. I guess that it would be nice because we installed them in order putting the first prototype at the very end of the small room, and then all the few steps, then we have the final knife. The finished product is the sharpened knife is the one that is next to me.
Well, the thing that's curious about what I like about the play that's happening in this this process of knife making is that it has the appearance of being the making of a single knife, because you see the slab of steel that then gets pressed by a machine that then gets cut out and then slowly gets ground until it's a knife as we recognize a knife. However, what it is several knives that have been stopped in their point of development. And so even though we're used to reading this kind of linearity, so we fill that in our mind, in fact, it would be six, each of those things in the space should be their own knife. And so that kind of attracted me to this idea of something being stopped all the time. That each, as you go from the sharpened knife closest to you to the slab of steel in the back, each iteration has less experience than the previous one.
Okay, so basically, witnessing 6 different moments in time.
Yes. Well, 6 different experiences. It's just that the development has been stopped. Okay. As a way of describing something. And so it's interesting so I just asked this person just to, I was like, well, how many steps are there? He's saying, well, there's many, but you could say that there's these ones. And it was like, can you just pull one out each time? And so it was just the coincidence of that. It's nothing. So
no date.
What's that?
The piece has no date, right? Like
no. No, that's not to be evasive. It's just that a thing like that thing sitting next to you is always in the present. And I'm not interested in isolating the moment in time where it became my artwork. I don't think that that's so interesting. And so that's the only reason why I don't use dates. The things that make up the work are always in the present.
In the present. Okay. Well, thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Marcella. I guess you have to run out of the museum now.
We now have to, yes, time. The day is ending, and we have to leave the museum. We leave it back to the artworks as the sole inhabitants of the space.
Good.
Thank you, Jason. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Thank you.